Hello and welcome to another episode of Motors for the Masses.
It's another 650.
So roll the intro and let's get cracking.
Crack!
I've been a real bad boy on the town all night. Starting to calm down with the morning light down in the dirt.
You may remember exactly a year ago we reviewed another CF Moto, and that was the NK650TT.
Well, now we have another 650 from CF Moto, the GT.
The GT uses the same Kawasaki-based liquid-cooled, fuel-injected, 4-valve double overhead cam parallel twin 650 engine.
A Bosch ECU with mapping options and a 6-speed gearbox.
The engine produces 60 brake horsepower,
And around 41 foot-pound of torque.
which means 0 to 60 is about 3.5 seconds,
And top speed of approximately 115 miles an hour.
which is not earth-shattering, but it's enough for anyone breaking into the mid-range bike group. The GT uses a steel frame, which of course is very sturdy, and under that cover there, but it also makes it a little bit heavy at just under 220 kilos. You get 300mm twin front discs with the Spanish double piston calipers.
And a 240mm rear disc with a single piston caliper using ABS.
With right way up forks on the front, you have the side mounted cantilever rear monoshock.
Up front you have a 120 Metzler tyre, on the rear a 160, and they're both mounted on 17-inch rims.
On the front you have this screen which is adjustable by undoing these knobs at the side here, and you just move it up and down to where you want it and then tighten it up again. You also get LED front lights like so, the main beam like this, and of course LED indicators and hazard flashes. And of course, LED rear lights also.
The exhaust on the GT is more traditional looking than the TT, and they have upgraded the dash to a fully digital display.
So then, let's start it up and take it out for a ride. as usual, I'll get my gear off and we'll have a chat. So I can safely say that this has the same low-down punch that the 650 TT has. It pulls very nicely in every gear, right up to speed without any problem. The dash is pretty clear, right up until the sun hits it, and then not so clear. Now that brings me on to the other issue with the dash. Now, do you remember the Benelli 502C? That had a different layout between day and night mode. Well, this has a similar problem, but it's not day and night, it's touring mode and sports mode. It changes the layout like this here. I don't really like that. The speedo is still in the middle, but the rev counter changes from across the top to around, and then it moves the temperature and everything else and the petrol to the one side instead of along the edge. I don't know why they do that. It's a cool gadget, but it can be confusing, I think. However, all in all, a minor flaw in what is otherwise a comfortable, sprightly, smooth ride. And I can safely say I am pretty impressed. The brakes are sharp, the ABS works really well, the throttle response is good. Everything else I don't seem to have any issue with. This low seat height makes you sit in the bike rather than on the bike. And this huge frontage makes it feel like a much bigger touring style bike. So I've got no problems with the comfortability of it. I've got no problems with the way it sits on the road. No problems with it only being a 650. It actually pulls really nicely. Very impressive. And being a touring bike, you don't really want it to do 150 miles an hour. Not that you can, of course, I might want to add. One thing, again, I guess you'll get used to it, but it doesn't have the traditional layout. You've got on here your mode that you can switch between touring and sport mode. You've got your lights on here and your indicators and your horn. But here is your start button, and you just pull it towards you to start and then turn it off to turn it off. However, again, it's not a major problem, and I can see that easily being able to get used to. When you are on the road and you are up to speed, cornering is absolutely simple as anything. The weight becomes irrelevant, and yes, it's 220 kilos, but you don't feel that when you're slinging it around the corners because it really does take them with ease. I don't see any issues with cornering, any issues with the ride, comfortability, the throttle response, the brakes. It's actually all really well built. I can't think of any negative. Even the parallel twins, a nice sounding engine. It's not tinny, it's not thumpy, it's just right. Really am quite impressed with it. The other thing is the gear change. Now, there were a couple of occasions where I didn't quite push it enough into gear, and I ended up revving a little bit in the previous gear. I think that's more me getting used to how far up I've got to come with it. Perhaps just adjusting the lever to my foot. Other than that, I don't think it's a problem or a flaw with the actual gear change. It's probably more the rider, to be fair.
The engine pumps out 125 CO2s, which is just a touch more than its competitors. But with its 18-litre fuel tank and 49 miles per gallon, you won't need to stop too often.
So what about its looks? Well, the bike was designed by Kiska, the same team that's behind the looks of KTM and Husqvarna, and I think it looks fantastic with its sharp lines as it works its way, meshing very well down the bike, all the way to the back here. And yes, we've taken the panniers off. Well, it's hardly surprising that it looks very KTM-y, because KTM have set up a partnership with CF Moto, and they're shifting some of their big bike production to China now. And I've heard that the new KTM 790 is actually going to be produced, not just the engine, but the whole bike in China. Which brings me on to my previous video that we mentioned a little while ago, that Chinese built bikes are not as bad as they used to be. as more and more big brands are shifting their production to China.
The GT comes in either black or blue, and we both prefer the blue. It's quite a sizable machine at almost 2.2 metres long, 835mm wide and 1.3 metres tall.
And very usable by anyone of any size, with a 795mm seat height, whether it's myself at 5'10½", Jamie at 6'1", ooh, or Nick at 4'6". Oh, I mean 5'6".
So, price?
Yes, it's £5,799 plus on the road costs. And if you want these racks and shad pannier boxes, they are £475 on top.
However, the 650 is not A2 adaptable. For that, you'd need the 400.
And I've been reliably informed that there is a 2020 price coming out with an exciting addition. However, I'm not allowed to tell you what that is at this moment in time. Very sorry, but I think you'll find it quite exciting. So how does this compare to its competitors?
Well, the Kawasaki 650 Versys with 9 brake horsepower more starts at 7,400 and the touring version 7,900.
The Kawasaki Ninja 650 with 8 brake horsepower more starts at 6,600 and the Tourer version 7,600.
The Suzuki 650 V-Strom with 11 brake horsepower more is also £7,600.
And the Yamaha Tracer 700 with 72 brake horsepower is nearly £8,000. So what are your thoughts? Please let us know in the comments section below. Do you have one of these already? Would you like one? Is there another alternative other than the ones that we've already mentioned? And if you do want one of the other ones we've mentioned, what's your reason why? And please don't just say, because this one's Chinese. Because we've had that discussion to death. And as you know, a lot of the bigger brands have already shifted their 50s and 125s to China for its production. And as we discussed earlier, that's where the bigger bike production is also now heading. So Chinese bikes are not what they used to be. And that brings me on to a little mini rant. Not about that, about something else. Why don't CF Moto make a 125? They do a 250, they do a 400, they do a 650, and there's bigger bikes coming. So why don't they do a 125? Can you imagine a 125 version of the NK650 TT? As long as it's liquid cooled and 14.5 brake horsepower, of course. So why don't you make it? Go on, CF Moto, do it. Do it now. For the love of bikes, do it. And we'll review it.
Finished?
Yes, I think so.
Good.
And that brings us to the end of this episode of Motors for the Masses. Thank you very much for joining us. If you've got any comments, please leave them in the comment section below. If you haven't, then don't. And we'll be back again soon with more bikes and more cars and more projects. That's it. You got anything else to say?
No, not really.
Good. And until next time, please ride and drive carefully.
But have fun.
Bye.
Bye.